I'm going to go ahead and reintroduce the panel title, which is They Do Anything for Clout, Decolonizing the Environmental Justice Movement. And also, again, introduce our esteemed moderator, Miss Gabby Martinez, who is a proud native Washingtonian and second-generation Howard University alumni. Go Bison. During her time at the Mecca, Miss Gabby, as she is affectionately known to her youth, hosted her own radio show on WHBC and interned on the Hill in the office of the DC mayor and the Girl Scout Council of the nation's capital. Always perfecting her passion for outreach and advocacy on behalf of girls and women, she became a master-trained SIHLE facilitator in 2012. Using this experience and passion, she created the Formation Conference, which is a conference created for the holistic empowerment of young Black girls. After 7 years of managing the Education and Outreach Department for Planned Parenthood DC, with experience, talent, and network in tow, Gabby took her passion for Black girl empowerment to the next level and founded the organization Tribe Incorporated, AKA the Black Girl Tribe. Tribe is an organization dedicated to the betterment of Black girls. Tribe does this by advocating for change and increasing access to sustainable resources for Black girls to not only thrive and survive, to not only survive Black girlhood, but to thrive in it. Gabby is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated and a member of the Girls Rock DC Board of Directors. When Miss Gabby is not spending or spreading her Black girl magic at one of Tribe's conferences or programs, you can find her laughing, crafting, or cooking for her loved ones. Miss Gabby is excited to be following in the footsteps of Black girl magicians turned ancestors like her true hero, Harriet Tubman, and continuing the legacy of the many magical Black women who have touched her life. Let us introduce Miss Gabby Martinez, our moderator.
Hello, everyone. Y'all dry. Let's try it again. Hello, everyone. So I got the lit panel, and I'm really, not to say anyone's weren't, but I have the lit panel essentially because we're gonna talk about race, and we're gonna talk about race when we're talking about working in these organizations, creating our organizations, and why we do so, okay? So if I could call to the stage my esteemed panelist, Miss Jewel Jones. Oh, sorry, Mr. Jewel Jones, my bad for misgendering. Okay, my bad. Where? They're gonna come? Oh, okay, so I don't have their bios? I'm gonna let them say who they are because I respect people's bios, and y'all read mine, and that was really awkward, so let's read everybody else's. Latricia Adams is the founder and CEO, president of Black Millennials for Flint. Give it up for her, thank you. Tami Sawyer, who is a Shelby County, Tennessee Commissioner District, a Shelby County. Charles Jackson, which is a member of the Baltimore Urban League. Ooh, nice suit, yes. I like that. We match, we need to take a picture later. Marisol Bye, the community mapper for Little Village Environmental Justice Organization. Marisol, ven, gracias. And Eric Brown, Friends of the Earth. Oh, okay, welcome. What's up? Okay, so let's jump into it. Just for this first question, when you guys get a chance, hey, I look like Beyonce for a reason. I need y'all to pay attention to me, okay? So, oh, I'm sorry, I don't have your name, but I'm gonna let you tell me. No. Hey, there we go. Welcome. Last but not least. Okay, so like I was saying, for this first question, if you all could briefly introduce yourself for the crowd before you answer. So, hitting hard from the beginning. How do you engage with prospective white allies without diminishing the integrity or watering down the mission of your respective organizations and movements? Straight to it, period.
So I'll start. So the first thing is, first, I'm Latricia Adams, again, if you weren't here when I did my introduction earlier. But I think one of the most important things to do is to maintain integrity of your identity. I'll give a quick example. So when we were coming up with the idea and the concept of Black Millennials for Flint, we were met with a lot of opposition about the name that we selected because we said Black. And so I wouldn't budge, as we can see, and there's reason behind that. So even from a spiritual perspective, particularly in the African American community, we understand the importance of names and namesakes. So I think that's the first thing that we should focus on. The other thing is being in 100% control of your narrative. So one of the things that's really important to us, especially since we focus on coalition building and building communities, we make sure that that we focus on communicating to the people who work with us that we're all in this together. But then the other part is we make sure that we amplify everybody's ministries. Again, I told you I'm from Memphis, so it's gonna sound like church. So make sure that we amplify the ministries and people that we actually work with. A lot of times when you work with larger predominantly white nonprofit organizations, especially in the environmental justice piece, they will rob you of your voice and your narrative and will completely change everything that you set out to do. So I think that it's really important to maintain the integrity of your identity, but then also making sure that you control the narrative of the people that you represent.
Thank you, thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Tami Sawyer, Shelby County Commissioner out of Tennessee, also Memphis, which I know is deep in the house. How do I maintain my integrity? I'm on a body of, and I was just talking about this earlier, I'm one of 13 county commissioners over a county that is almost 70% people of color, and I'm the only Black woman on that board. And so for me, sometimes it means being one of two people who's willing to go against the grain. Sometimes I'm the only one, you know, who feels a certain way about things. And I just have learned to be unafraid. I think when I first started, I was a little scared to always be hitting the cue to, you know, say what I was gonna say. And I would watch my white Republican colleagues roll their eyes and huff and puff. And my fellow commissioner is here, he knows, they be huffing and puffing at me. I'd be like, well, blow down the damn house, but you gonna get these words today, you know? Yes. And I think over and over again, I know that I was elected to speak up. I know that I won, and I won my seat in a time such as this to be a person who was unafraid to call out the effects of white supremacy in a city that has been unable to to change outcomes for Black people in over 100 years. And so for me, it's time up for us to be nice because, as James Baldwin says, it's one of my favorite quotes of all times, when James Baldwin said, you know, my grandfather waited for your progress, my father waited for your progress, how much longer am I supposed to wait for your progress? And if we keep telling each generation of leaders, just wait your turn, calm down, things will happen, it's gonna be 3 more generations later and Black people are still gonna be in the same situation, so it's time for us to shit or get off the pot.
Hey, say that, right? And I think some of the things you're talking about, specifically, not make it about you guys, but specifically being a Black woman and challenging the narrative of being the angry Black woman in the room when you're constantly femming the conversation, blackening the conversation, and everybody's like, really, again? And it's like, yeah, really, again, you're doing it again. So, question, same one for you.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Charles Jackson. I am representing the Greater Baltimore Urban League as well as the National Urban League Young Professionals. I'm the Policy and Procedures Chair. But what I do for work is exactly this. So I'm a diversity practitioner and community and faith-based liaison. So I have to
that's right.
look at this question daily. So my first thing is always know what your mission is. Many of us in here are part of an organization. If I asked you what your organization is, you would gladly yell it out right now. If it was a Greek organization, you have, your secret handshakes and your different sounds and stuff. I didn't pledge anything, so yes, I'm just making fun of you a little bit. But thank you for the chuckle in the back. But seriously, if I told you to yell out your organization, you would. But if I said, what is your organization's mission? It might be crickets in here. So that is always the first thing right there. So to Latricia's point in regards to specifically naming the organization, having black in the title, it means something. And everyone knows, if you didn't know, I'm black. I just want to let you in on that secret. Many of you may not know that. And so when I walk into a room, I am a black person. So I am representing African American community locally and nationally. So I need you to understand, if we're partnering, who I'm working for and why we're here, and how exactly are we going to be able to work together on this mission, which is to support black people. And if you can't work on that, I may still accept your money, because we need your money, but you're going to know what this money is going towards and what it's for. And if you can get with the program, so be it. If you can't, we can find someone else to fund our opportunities.
Hello, everyone. My name is Elise Tolbert. I currently work with the Climate Action Campaign. I work on climate change issues. And I would echo what my fellow panelists have said. One, ensuring that you can stand your ground, know the lines on which you will and won't go. And then two, ensuring that you go into situations with no fear. Often there's more than enough justification for why your organization or why your initiative that addresses black issues, because of the myriad of health disparities, of economic injustices, of environmental injustices, does what it does, and does it because it does that. Going into the mission, I also think mission is important, but what I'd add to that is armor yourself with knowledge. If you understand the issue area on which you're working on, if you have a case for support, a case for what you're doing and why you're doing it, I think that really helps bringing that level of knowledge into a room, because we do live in a world where facts are thrown away pretty easily these days, but there are still some places where facts do matter. And we're getting into a point of big data where we have pretty firm statistics, but even beyond statistics, qualitative stories that matter, stories that move, and understanding both that lived experience coupled with the data that supports what you're doing, and being courageous about giving those stories. I think that really helps in terms of being able to work and leverage the type of work that you're doing with the type of mission you have in predominantly white environments.
Okay, thank you. So this question says, how does race, class, gender impact the environmental justice movement informed by white supremacy? But I would like to tailor it to say, what specific examples have you seen race, class, gender impact environmental awareness informed by white supremacy? So firsthand examples, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Eric Brown. I live in Memphis, Tennessee. Work for an organization called Friends of the Earth. To give an example, I think from the question that I heard, I'm hearing about a lot of funders right now that are loving to give a lot of money to different organizations, and they're specifically asking for people of color, mainly either black or black women, to do a lot of this work. But they're going to a lot of these different organizations that are predominantly white to do it. So I saw it happen two ways. I've either saw it to where, to get this money for funding, I'm seeing a lot of white environmental organizations subcontract out money to a lot of black organizations and say that we're about diversity, we're about the work, and so to do this, we're going to give you some money to make sure that you're doing your work. But they're giving it to black organizations that they consider are hot on the streets. But with that, they're not really giving them money, they're giving them pennies of the money that they're actually getting. So if they're getting the dollar, they're giving somebody a penny or a nickel as far as that money. Another way I've seen it happen is that because they are being pushed to go for people of color to actually be on these organizations, they're picking who those people are, but they're not necessarily picking the ones that are being most affected by a lot of the issues. I would say they're going after who they consider the docile or the token Negro of a lot of these organizations. And then when that person actually shows who they are, being very authentic in who they are as themselves, now for some reason the culture may not be the culture for that particular person. That's not the place that they need, that's not the environment that they want. So they want your color for the money, they just don't necessarily want your actions that come along with that money.
They want your color for the pictures too. Right, yeah.
Hello, my name is Marisol Bye. I'm a community mapper with the Little Village Environmental Justice Organization, where we led a 10-year campaign to shut down 2 of the country's oldest coal-fired power plants, which were located in Black and Latino neighborhoods in Chicago. One of the greatest struggles that we faced is the fact that the coal power plants were located in Black and Latino neighborhoods. Politically, at the time, we were not taken seriously. It took a lot of effort to learn things that our white counterparts would learn in college. Things like chemistry, policy. This is stuff that we had to learn in our community, with each other, through the internet, the library, without a formal degree. That, I think, highlights the educational inequalities that exist in our neighborhoods, but also the lack of access to resources and funding. So in order for this achievement to happen, we had to build coalitions with big greens, and that was a bit scary, and in some instances, my organization received some pushback. A lot of folks in the neighborhood were asking, why would you allow these big greens, which are mostly white and affluent, come into our community and help us? Is that really helping or not? So one of the ways that we were able to mitigate some of the concerns of the community was to develop a memorandum of understanding, or a community agreement, with the big greens that volunteered to help us win this struggle. That was mostly an effort of trust. We had no other choice but to trust. We wanted those coal power plants shut down. They had the resources. We had a very small budget. At the time, our organization operated with less than 6 figures. And in order to shut down these coal power plants, it would take a national effort, not just a city effort, but a state and national effort. Our struggle was able to make the news internationally, and that was not a simple feat. I'm glad that you echo the issues with funding, because those were issues that we also faced during this campaign, the process of regranting organizations. In some instances, that made my organization kind of dependent on these regranting operations, and I think there's a big need to not just regrant, but to train organizations, small local organizations, train them to be able to write their own grants, to seek those big funders, but also with the social capital that we have in this room and that we have nationally, collectively, as millennials, we can create our own foundation so that we are not consistently relying on these major foundations that are predominantly white, that create their own measures for success. We need to be the ones drafting those measures of success. And that's going to allow us to continue pushing our agendas forward. So it is not easy. It's definitely easier said than done. But I think that some of the things that we're talking about today can help lead us and create that map to a brighter and sustainable future.
Thank you. Okay, so this next question says, given the large portion of African diaspora and uncolonized lands, inheriting self-hatred and anti-blackness, intentionally designed to villainize our Africanness. What are tools that Black bodies and minds can rely on in the States, the Caribbean, and Latin America to decolonize our critical minds in healing spaces? How do you unlearn philosophies? But I want to also, again, tailor this question to say, how do you unlearn philosophies, which one will know has to start with the youth of this generation to unlearn the philosophies, right? But how do you do that with so much of the Earth Day and recycling and sustainability marketing materials completely targeted to white people and white children? Specifically being the founder and the executive director of a youth-serving, specifically Black-girl organization, it is super hard. Besides, shout out to Christina, my resources at Black Millennials for Flint, to find any kind of environmental justice or social environmental justice materials tailored to Black people. So when we're going out into these communities and we're trying to galvanize support from people that look like us, how do we do that when no one has ever really told us that, let alone this country belongs to us, but this planet?
Okay, so my first thought was we've already started with this organization. Mm-hmm. So ethnic background, I'm African American, and when I was doing my diversity training, they said, okay, we're going to take you off of U.S. soil, and we went to Salvador de Bahia, Brazil. So the first thing I thought about, this was in the early 2000s. The only Brazilian I knew was Gisele Bündchen, and I thought all Brazilians were, blonde, blue-eyed, and about 6 feet tall. And I got there, and they all looked like everyone in the room. I was shocked. I thought I got on the wrong plane and woke up in Africa. I was disoriented for a second. But what I learned once I got there was they were duplicating the efforts of African Americans in this country in regards to their racial justice. So that implanted in me that, particularly for those of us who are here, who are privileged to be here, we are actually already leading by example, and others throughout the diaspora are following what we do. So that's one thing. And the second thing is when it goes to the representation thing, if you don't see it, create it. So I'm happy that right now there's so many people who are taking pictures, who are hashtagging, who are online and everything like that, because that allows you to be, your picture may show up on somebody's portfolio or program and you don't know it, so smile. Fix your makeup, some of you are shining. There we go. And that's the third thing, being in this space, not taking ourselves so seriously all the time. I've said a couple corny jokes. I appreciate those who've given me the pity laugh, frail male ego in play. I appreciate you. But no, really, I try. But really being able to look at those things and take a look at ourselves, see what we're doing, and tell the story about what we're doing and why we're doing it. Because oftentimes, many of us in here are busy, we're working on these efforts, and we're so embodied in the work that we're forgetting to tell the stories. So when our white counterparts who are doing the same thing, if not less, they're getting the money, or getting funding because they are telling a great story while we're sitting there doing the work.
Essentially leaning on our Africanness to be griots, to be people that tell the story, to pass on that same knowledge, that's vital.
When you know who you are, no one can stop you. And that's known. It has to be known. That's why our textbooks in elementary and middle school don't teach us about who we are. Because if they taught us about who they are, then they couldn't control us. And so I think that as individuals, beyond environmentalism, but as individuals, as we increase in our level of consciousness of who we are, of why we exist, and of our unlimited potential, our responsibility then in a world that is not constructed for us to understand that becomes to teach others, specifically your younger cousins, your younger sisters and your brothers, your mother and father who did not have the opportunity to grow in the level of consciousness that we do because of information that we get from so many sources. And so I think that's what we can do at an individual level. At a structural and more systematic level, there are opportunities for your organization to partner with organizations such as my sister's organization. I am the founder and executive director of Next Step Up. It is a organization, nonprofit in Alabama, Tuskegee, where I'm from, that provides mentoring and tutoring to high school students. And I started as a freshman in college because I realized that so many of my counterparts in high school were not able to go to college or anywhere else, and they didn't see life past 2 years. They said 4 years in college, I'm not doing that. Do you know how much I made selling drugs on the street? Literally. And so that organization provides a new outlook on life for high school students. And I think that there are opportunities for us to partner with organizations who serve the youth as well, through both the organizations in which we work in and also the ones that we volunteer with, so that we can begin to deprogram or reprogram both ourselves and others, and create a world of higher consciousness.
And to add on to that, another thing that I believe is incredibly important as we speak about the African diaspora, but then also taking into consideration that racism is replicated globally. The existence of anti-blackness literally looks the same as you navigate the world. In addition to the anti-blackness, there's also issues that are pervasive in the Latino community as well. It is imperative that Black and brown people unite and understand the complexities and nuances of white supremacy. When we think about what white supremacy looks like in silos, that means that our cause will never see success if we're not able to pick apart what that oppression looks like, how it looks like in other cultures, and how can we band together to truly dismantle white supremacy. I also think that it is important to think globally. Again, just bringing it to Flint, Michigan. A lot of people, and this really bothered me, a lot of people came from a place of pity. I was like, oh my goodness, oh, that's so messed up what's happening in Flint. Honey, do you know what's going on in your own backyard? So when we think about white supremacy and think about all the isms, so also thinking about classism. So yes, racism exists, but when you think about environmental justice, especially right here in the District of Columbia, if you lived here, you know this looks way different than what it used to. But thinking about how even white supremacy shows up in gentrification and how that impacts advocacy as it relates to environmental justice spaces. So quick story, even some of the work that we did locally, where the whistleblower around lead being in the water in school happened east of the river, okay? So we're talking about Ward 8. But it wasn't until Capitol Hill and Montessori, that is very affluent, sent up a red flag that there actually was a hearing. So we have to talk about how, even how Capitol Hill looks right now, it didn't used to 20 years ago. So we have to make sure that while we are advocating, we're also calling people out. When you are doing things that are oppressive, I don't care how much money you've given to Black and brown people, we're still gonna let you know our truths and those things that are unjust.
Yes. Oh, okay. Let's do one more. Rock, paper, scissors, like adults.
Actually, question.
Okay.
On the topic of gentrification, should I hold?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Okay.
Yes. I promise, it's coming.
I might be somewhat different on this, but I try to learn as much about white supremacy as possible. And then I also try to make sure to learn about my own history within context. I'll give you an example of what I mean by trying to learn as much more about white supremacy. It wasn't until I got with a professor in my grad school that constantly always gave us white philosophers, and the other professors would say, why are you always teaching on white philosophers? Why are you not teaching on Black philosophers? But what he really set inside of me was a foundation of understanding how things have been created. To even think about the fact that we say white and Black, where I've heard certain people talk about their ethnicity all the time. They might say I'm Irish, they might say they're Polark, all these other different things. But then the next thing you know, the way that they were able to keep on going, at least within America, was they're no longer Irish, they're white. And I don't think I always get afforded to be able to say that I'm white within those situations. So I just continually read, and the reason why I think, even when we're talking about gentrification or other things that's going on with us now, I think if we don't understand our history, we're always doomed to repeat it. And I think the same thing also goes with philosophies, of where we sometimes do not want to hear a lot about a lot of these histories or philosophies, but I think we need to. And I think we need to because of the fact of not that we don't already know them, but sometimes we need to understand how tactics are consistently being repeated and repeated and repeated again on us. The second thing is, like I said, learning in context. I'm from North Nashville in Tennessee. And I just think about a lot of times, the area that I live in, North Nashville, was a very industrial area with all these different buildings that caused a lot of this pollution. Or I think about all these freeways that go back and forth, but there's really no access within my community. And then I think about, why was the freeway put in this particular section and not in these other particular sections? And the next thing I know, because there were a lot of viable black businesses, and those were the exact things that they actually took out within those areas in North Nashville, to be able to make sure that those businesses no longer succeed, and then we have all these other issues. So I'm just saying that I don't necessarily think I try to unlearn them. I try to be very critical of what I have learned and make sure that I remind myself of what I've learned, to just see what type of games again are being played with us.
Okay. So taking a note from what you said, thinking about the context of history and people of color's relationship to water, in thinking about this panel, specifically the situation in Flint, we as people of color, as black and brown people, have always had issues with water when it comes to dealing with white people. From water being the mode in which we were transported here, to then being the thing that we were kept away from by not being able to learn to swim, not having access to bathing in fresh water, working in the fields, to then moving forward into the civil rights era. What was the main ways of communicating segregation? Water fountains, pools, bathrooms, all these things. And then to continue into the same situation now, we know that, we've seen that, we now, if you never paid attention to it, I just brought it to your attention right now. What do we do in the face of gentrification? Because she said a word, like, literally the space that we're sitting in, y'all, did not exist 10 years ago, and we would not have wanted to be in this space in whatever way it was 10 years ago. I'm DC born and bred, Northeast. I live 10 minutes away, and every time I step on my door, the city looks different, and it feels less and less like mine. And I know that my youth feel the exact same way, with the quickening, because I didn't necessarily have to deal with gentrification as a youth. I lived in Chocolate City, so I know the glory. But at the same time, like, how do we reclaim our space? Not just DC, not just Capitol Hill and Georgetown, which were historically black neighborhoods, not just Southeast, which is getting milkier and milkier every day. You know what I'm saying? Like, how do we reclaim these spaces nationally? I've been to Memphis. I've seen that black people are corralled into these certain places. And, you know, I've been to New Orleans. I know why the levees broke in that certain area. Now that we know this knowledge, now that we know agitate, 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 we know that they're not listening, and we know that they could not muster a fuck to give pretty much about us. How do we reclaim this space? And I'm asking for direct action from you all, and not just pipe dreams, because we have to do something.
Okay, all right. You said a lot. Did she really just say it became milky? Wow. Did you say milkier? I don't even think that's a word. All right, it is a word now. Okay, I'll she copyrighted it. I'll pay you. Passing around the black dollar. But the first thing I think of is, when you talk about waterside, as you said earlier, in regards to looking at history. So I'm from Baltimore. We do a lot of things very well, and one of them was redlining. We were the first city in the country to have racist laws on the book. So we always end up getting the horribleness around history, but we also have some greatness as well. But we do it well. Racism is embedded in every part of Baltimore City. If you're in a nicer area, it was specifically built that way from the beginning. No one wanted to live by the water. So that's where black people were pushed historically. There's pestilence by the water. There is where the shipyards are. Black people were put there. There's a neighborhood called Cherry Hill, which still has some of the worst health disparities in the nation that resemble a third world country because it was specifically built to house black people. So as you were saying, to look at it from historical nature, that it was by design. It is doing the system is doing what it's supposed to, particularly when we're talking about white supremacy. The second thing is you said, well, what is the action item that we can do right now? And the first thing I thought of is everyone in here looks really nice. Many of you are suited and booted. You got your nice bags and everything. Brother got on a nice fitted trim suit up there. I see you, looking at you. And the first thing I think about is many of us in here may be working a nice job, may possibly have a 401k, have a little savings. It's pooling of money. It's very simple. It doesn't have to be a lot of money, but it could be a pooling of money, and we're seeing this around the country now where people are literally buying back their blocks. Or if you can't buy a block, start with a house. If you can't buy a house, start with an apartment, rent it out to people that look like you, make sure the rent will stay that way while the area is gentrifying, and duplicate it until you have now, you and your crew have multiple properties where it's yours. We're actually doing this, a couple of young black professionals in Baltimore right now. So you said action item, that's not a pipe dream. You can do this today. If you're not sure how to do it, every city in the country has a REIA, a REIA. That's a Real Estate Investors Association. Find some black investors or brown investors or people that look like you who are doing the work right now that you can drive by their properties and you can look it up on the state or city database and see what properties they bought and sold and say, you know what, I don't have time. I have a full-time job. I'm serving in multiple organizations, but I do have a couple $100s in savings that I can give to you. Let's work together. You get your property, I get a return on investment. It's very simple.
So I'll try to keep it brief because I can talk about this for hours. I'm writing my dissertation on this topic. What happens when a community is successful in achieving environmental justice? That's what happened in Chicago. You know, we shut down the coal power plants. We also had a 15-acre brownfield that became the largest brownfield to greenfield conversion in the U.S. It's a beautiful park. But the prices of the homes went up, rent went up, and a lot of the community residents are not home owners. And this is impacting my own family as well. My parents are homeowners, and they are seeing their property taxes also rise. So they're wondering, well, are we even going to stay in this neighborhood? Are we going to find ourselves forced to sell this home? Those are questions that people in the community are asking, not just in Chicago, but nationally and globally. This is a global issue. Redlining has a lot to do with it. Historically, housing prices have been very much tied to race. And I think that one of the ways that we can mitigate gentrification and really hold our space is not just also buying homes, which I think is important, and if you have the capacity, please do so, but also to support local businesses. There are so many storefronts that I've seen shut down because we are not supporting them. So go and support your local coffee shop instead of buying your Starbucks. You know, go and support those spaces that nurtured you while you were growing up. It's very much needed. Or start your own business as well. I think those are some of the key ways we can do so, but also creating your own spaces, community centers, bringing people together. That's what's going to show that there is community and that there is unity.
So for me, I think that another thing that's really important as far as direct action is engaging with your elected officials. So there's so many things that come across my desk every day that no one's advocating on, so it doesn't get elevated, right? Like I can yell till I'm blue in the face, but if you don't call the other 12 people about this, no one else is gonna either be aware or care about it if it's not in their loop. And so like I think about when we have issues, for example, NIMBYism, y'all know what that is? Not in my backyard. It is very big right now in Memphis. So in white parts of town, they are very clearly trying to make sure that there's not an expansion of apartment buildings. They will show up in numbers, email all of us, those who don't represent their district and everyone, and be like, you better not vote for this apartment building, you better not vote for this easement, you better not vote for this sewer line to be run because we don't want y'all creeping over here. It's very clearly steeped in race. But on the flip side, when it's developments that impact our communities, and especially the low-income communities, the chambers are empty, right? And so I agree with my brother, and I'm sorry I didn't catch your name, Charles, that we all look really good. And so there's a lot of privilege, and Latricia talked about classism, so I'm never gonna judge somebody who can't make it to our 3 o'clock committee meetings, but the direct action that we need is to organize people to understand the power of their voice in the political process. We approved a, $70 million, $90 million tax break for a brand new parking lot downtown in a part of town that we just pushed out black people on contaminated soil and got them out of there, redid the soil, got rid of the lead poisoning that was happening, and now we're building mixed-use buildings, and we're gonna open a mall that none of us are really gonna be able to afford to shop at. And a lot of us pushed on it on the commission, but there weren't enough people there to advocate on the other side, so we couldn't say we have public pressure to shut this down, or we have public pressure to not give you these tax breaks. They couldn't even understand why some of us were saying, this is not enough, or we don't need this right now. But then, of course, when it comes time for money for schools, we can't find the money, and I go on and on and on. So, direct action, run for office, right? Flip every effing seat, from local all the way to national seats. And I'm gonna reiterate, y'all's local seats are the most powerful change you can make, is running for local office. More stuff happens at the local level that directly impacts us. That's your water, that's your schools. I can go on and on and on. Run for local office and organize people to realize that all they have to do is show up, 50 of them, pull a card on a Monday afternoon and speak, and the whole vote will change.
Okay, one more right down here. Yeah, and then I have one more question after that. Okay. Y'all killing me, Smalls.
Also, not only running for office, but also making sure that we're going for seats that are being appointed. I think sometimes we always forget about that. If I talk about the Democrat or Republican Party, don't matter. If somebody is voting in Tennessee or whatever, you have executive committee member seats. We don't always think to go for those type of seats, but if we did, we'd also realize that comes with controlling the money for that particular party and where that goes to. Also, when we put certain people in office, and I want to make sure to put the plug out there regardless, Commissioner Sawyer is running for mayor in Memphis. She definitely has my vote, but she also has my money. With that, I want to make sure that I put my money behind that. But the reason why I want to push that is because if she gets in, we need to make sure that we understand those appointed seats. Right now, with our president, literally as we were talking, the EPA just rolled back some Obama administration stuff as far as our waterways. Yep. While we were in here, that was literally just happening. But that also talks about who we're putting over a lot of these particular departments for that to happen. So not only just think about who we're voting for, but also who are they appointing in those particular issues, and are we putting our resumes in there as well to make sure that we're the people that can also be a part of that.
The last thing that I'd like to add is that you asked the question, what does achieving environmental justice look like? And I think that's an important question because often achieving environmental justice, as in the example you just provided, opens the door for gentrification. And I think of DC as a very transient city. Some of us are native from this area, but a lot of us are from somewhere else. And a lot of the urban centers and urban cities are being gentrified globally. But if you come from a small rural town like I do, my town has not been gentrified yet. My town is 99% black right now. But as the availability of land decreases, my town, as not many people see it, is potentially just on the verge of being on the chopping block, and 10 years from now, not looking like the place where Booker T. Washington set his foot, casted his bucket, and built a university to educate black people. And so the one thing I'd say is to think about pre-gentrification policies. And however, whenever you go home to visit your mom, your dad, your grandma, you speak to the elected officials in your city where you are from to make sure that if, gentrification is going to happen in the future, that there is a property tax cap, for instance, or other policies that can keep the people who were there before in place in the event of gentrification and renewal.
All righty. Well, our time is up for questions, or the whole thing, or do we take questions now?
Hello, thank you all for your expertise. My name is Kwanzaa Billy. I'm a social impact strategist. I'm also the newly elected civic engagement chair for Thursday Network Urban League. Thank you. So it was really important for me to hear from you. I'll say I'm also a transplant. I'm from New York, and I watched this happen, gentrification, the ramification of environmental justice, being pulled from the waterfront into urban areas where then we became violence, race, all these things. You have people from different neighborhoods now fighting for territory, all types of stuff, and now the reclaiming of waterfronts, very similar to what's happening where I chose to live in DC, Ward 7 and 8. So how do we, as privileged individuals who can be here at 4 o'clock on it's DC, it's a lot of things going on, I don't even know what day it is, but it is really 4 o'clock and we're sitting here having this conversation. How do I empower my committees and my general body to get who we are in the matter? And to use the same time we would traditionally use for a happy hour, because it's 4 o'clock, to months between October and March, be at I'm sorry, my brain, because I'm hot right now, to show up when we are having oversight hearings, when we are having budget hearings, and to also attend local ANC meetings so they can be the voice for the folks who are working 2 and 3 jobs or trying to pick up their kid or whatever. What are some takeaways for me to ignite folks to agitate?
All right. Well, first and foremost, thank you for the shout out, Thursday Network. So if anybody is from the DC area, they are the local chapter of the National Urban League Young Professionals. If you are not from the area, check out the local chapter, because that is one way to be able to get involved quickly. My first thought is understand, and you kind of already said your answer, understand who you have in the room. Everyone may not be able to show up. And they always talk about the same 10 people. If it's the same 10 people, if they can get one other person, you just duplicated your numbers right there. Understand that everybody is not about that life. I am from Baltimore, so sometimes my slang comes out a little bit. I do know how to speak the King's English very well, though. So everybody's not about that life. Don't ask them to be. Don't invite anybody to your party that you don't want to be there. That's one thing. And the second thing is once you get the folk in the room, see who, we already said it earlier, see who those allies are where you can be able to make things happen. There's enough folk in here right now to have a whole movement right now. I'm hoping people are passing out business cards. If you don't have a card, if you're on social media, exchange your social media handles and all those things, because that's how we can make the movement happen right there. I think there's this there's this false memory, it's not even a memory that folk have, particularly black folk, that everybody got along in the movement 60 years ago. Everybody didn't like each other. Who was it that called out King, said he needs to stop dreaming and go somewhere? It was a woman. Was it not Hattie McDaniel, but what's her name? I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. Who said that? Fannie Lou Hamer, thank you. Thank you. She didn't necessarily like him. They was doing similar work, but she knew what she needed to do because she was in a certain place and he was in a different place. So those are a couple things. I hope that was helpful. Know who your allies are. Know who those top 10 people are who are going to be doing the work, and utilize people where they are in their space. If they're community folk and they can't be at something from 9 to 5, utilize their time afterwards, but also compensate them, because when we talk about being able to pay people, it's a big deal.
I have 500 little black girls in this city that get out of school at 3:15. What you trying to do, sis? Like, we can pull up. So at the end of the day, don't sleep. My girls will show up, and they got Metro passes, so they can come wherever for free, okay? They ride for free. So, and they love a good turn up, and they love a good turn up with a purpose. So you have different networks. It might not look like the activists you're used to, but it might be the activists you need.
A lot of the work that I do, I just wanted to just people know, because I'm always preaching how powerful policy is, legislation is. I'm a Washingtonian. I'm founder of a nonprofit, and so just the power of an individual. So for somebody to be, I'm gonna base it off DC. For somebody to be at the J.O. Wilson building for a D.C. City Council hearing, testifying, one person who may be testifying as a D.C. resident is very powerful, and it's documented, and it goes, and when it's documented, it definitely goes down on paper, and when it's gone, I'm drinking and stuff, sorry, I'm coming from, but this is a very important point though. When it's documented, that one thing is very powerful. Me, just having a nonprofit that's incorporated in DC, for me to go and speak at a city council hearing, it is powerful. I represent a certain amount of people. Often we don't understand that level of power. And so for, like you just said, you represent X amount of young ladies in the city. For you to bring 2 or 3 of them up and for them to speak properly at a J.O. Wilson building at a city council hearing, is extremely powerful, and trust me, those type of testimonies are the type of testimonies that change legislation. They change with 500, you might not know at the time, but they change with $1.5 million or $500,000 of the budget is going to, because it's on paper. So we gotta just remember, we gotta cross the T's, dot the I's in this policy and legislation piece. But that was just one thing, I thought that was a great point, and you gotta meet people where they are. We don't need those numbers all the time that we think we need. We need numbers, we need support, but we can also just work with what we have, take lemons and make lemonade, because we're working with a lot. To see this space right here, to see these people all together, having these conversations, it all takes, if 2 or 3 people was to leave from here and just to say, look, we're going to promote, man, being at these city council hearings from a local level, which I just heard earlier, and I definitely agree with. Local politics is the seed and the most powerful piece of sort of like changing legislation, and everybody knows policy has the major impact. And I'm gonna shut up now.
I have a question. Them first.
No, just last one.
No, you get last question.
Ask a question. Okay. What are some other ways that we can be thinking about what those policies might be? Because DC and other cities are facing this right now, where they're taking public housing and they're, telling people that they have to leave because they're gonna, redevelop the property because it has lead, it has other hazards going on, and they're doing it just now in response to climate change, right? So we're facing this whole issue of climate gentrification that we're seeing. And so I like that you mentioned bringing up, the cap that, caps the property taxes, but what are some other pre-gentrification policies that we can be advocating for? So for example, when people are being displaced from public housing, they're being told that, you'll be able to come back, but then once they've developed the property, it's mixed income. And originally there were 200 units maybe for public housing, but now there's only 100 left. So only 50% of the people are actually able to come back. How can we combat that, and how can we come together as a unified front to advocate for more pre-gentrification policies?
I know I see someone in here with a "Don't Mute My" shirt on. Don't mute my health, right, and don't mute my DC. So I've been going to the Don't Mute DC rallies because I think that is just one really, first of all, it's fun, but those are also really powerful ways to advocate, to show public support for what we do and don't want. The other thing is that there has been a really good body of research so far on pre-gentrification policies and the types of things that we can put in place where no one's really looking. If you go to a place, not like DC, but if you go to a place where things haven't changed yet, and you put those, and that's kind of why I said go home and do this. If you go to a place where things haven't changed yet but can change, you can really make a lot of change right now because nobody's looking. Nobody's thinking like, oh, we're protecting Wakanda. They're just thinking, you know, you're just doing whatever. I'm not personally familiar with the right strategies for ensuring that we keep and protect all of the places that are sacred for Black people while also making sure that those places are safe, because we do want lead remediated. We do want people in safe and healthy environments, but also we want them to be able to stay there. I'll defer to my panelists.
One strategy, not necessarily policy, but a strategy that can help mitigate gentrification is to engage in community urban planning, and that is working with the developer, with the city, with local universities, with urban planning students, working with community to develop what that space is going to look like. And that in some ways can help eliminate this issue of the mixed income housing, or having a mall that nobody wants or that no one will go to. Those are some of the ways that I think can be successful in preventing or limiting gentrification.
Just to piggyback, I was actually going to say something similar. Look at what the city planner is doing. About 10 years ago, a friend of mine, when we were doing some real estate investing, he showed me the master plan for DC. And it's so crazy to me because everything that was on that master plan a decade ago has happened. That whole NOMA area, it was literally a website that showed what NOMA was going to look like before it happened. So these things, again, I go back to what I said earlier, it's by design. So the information is already out there. And I know for Baltimore, many of the advocates, when they see something coming down the pipeline, I forget who was it, who said something on the panel in regards to money going towards these, I think you said something about parking lot or something in your area. These things are made public early. So the advocates in Baltimore was like, okay, you just gave multiple $1 million TIF to Kevin Planks and Under Armour. This mixed use area, we need you to up the number of people who are low income that can be able to get in the building. They didn't get the full number that they were looking for. I think they only upped it by half, but it was still a win because now more people who couldn't afford it a couple months ago now can. So those are the two things that I say, the city planner and then see what's going on. And also the third thing is see where investors are. If you start seeing people pop up in areas that you've never seen before, you need to start getting in there now because that means that something is coming down the pipeline.
The money is coming. Okay, so after you speak, I'm gonna give it. But 1, 2, 3, got it.
To that question, I have a friend, hopefully he becomes council member at large today in Nashville, named Fabian Bedney. He told me about something that's going on in Brazil called participatory budgeting, to where the money, whatever council, well in Nashville it's councils or districts, that the district gets to decide where that money, how that money is used for their particular district. So that personally depends on how your districts are set up. I get all that and understand, but in Nashville at least, we understand that though it might look like a diverse city, it's actually very racially segregated. in a lot of different areas. So if the money is actually budgeted equally within different districts, those districts get to be able to talk about that. So I'm not in stone on that. I'm still researching that, but participatory budgeting.
I have been struck by all of the strategies and ideas and suggestions. The one thing that really stuck out to me was that a lot of decisions start on the local level. And I want to just reiterate that. As a person who ran for school board many years ago, what I did on a very limited budget was walked my community. Walked my community with my cane, my MS. I walked the community, got out, met my neighbors, heard their voice. They wanted their voices heard about school issues and what else was going on in the community. But the point that I want to make is start locally, and it's not as difficult in terms of if you want to run for office. It's not that difficult. It's not that cost prohibitive that many people think. So, that's what I wanted to add, and then I'm just saying also carry on as what you all are doing, and thank you. Thank you.
One more question.
Mine was more of a statement, and so Charles, you spoke to about where the investors are, but also prior to, I'm a DC native, and I took a class, urban planning, at Howard, and back in 2005, and I seen the same thing, but I was young and I didn't know. But the strategies that the investors were using was looking for areas that seemed abandoned. And so we then have to then teach our people how to take care and take pride in what's ours. And so a lot of investors go to communities that they feel like people don't care about. They're looking for, and it's mediocre, it might be minimum, but blinds that are all over the place. The yard is unkept. Their fence is, just the whole property is decaying. And so those areas they go and they take advantage of. And so we then have to teach our community how to then recognize the resources that we have within ourselves and how to maintain and upkeep the things that we do have. Because if we don't, just like DC, they're gonna take it away from us. Given DC, for example, Georgetown was predominantly black. Georgetown was considered a swamp area. They thought that they could not build in Georgetown. Black people inhabited that area, made it livable, and then now you have homes for multi-million-dollar homes there. And so we do have to take it a step further, not only in educating ourselves, but on the ground, we have to teach our people how to take care and make it matter what we do have.
Amen. All right, I have been informed that I have let this go on too long. I'm a terrible moderator. I just like to talk. So I would like to say thank you to all of my panelists. I appreciate you all, your time, your opinions. Thank you all for coming and valuing this conversation. Please, if you have not, make sure that you've signed in so that you can keep up with Black Millennials for Flint. And thank you for attending the Young, Gifted, and Green Summit during the CBC. Thanks.
Thank you.